The air inside the store is summer cool, a relief from the Florida heat that shimmers off the asphalt outside. It smells faintly of new plastic and carpet glue, of fresh cardboard and 1,000 boxes waiting for 1,000 homes. The hum of fluorescent lights hangs overhead like a distant, quiet ocean. Carts squeak. A register sings a metallic bell. And in the toy aisle, a little boy with sunlit hair stares at a screen. An Atari demonstration. His eyes wide with that kind of wonder only children still carry without apology. His name is Adam. He is 6 years old. A mother, Reve, hovers a few aisles away, thinking in small domestic lists. Curtains, lampshades, the errand to squeeze in before the afternoon evaporates. She surveys the aisle, memorizes the small shape of him, the way he plants his sneakers apart like a superhero posing for a school picture. "I'll be right back," she says, the way parents do, the way 1,000 parents do in 1,000 stores every day. You can feel it, can't you? The way a moment turns into a hinge. The way a door opens and it doesn't look like a door at all. Outside, the sun is relentless. Inside, the clock moves through 4 strange minutes. The store intercom crackles. Somewhere, a guard asks a cluster of kids to leave the electronics display. A wrong door, a tangle of feet, a quick, frightened decision. And when the mother returns, when she rounds the aisle with a smile, she sees it first as an absence, and then as a scream that won't come out. Where does a 6-year-old go, in the space between a breath and the next? How far can a child travel in 4 minutes? And who, in a world that looks safe, waits for a door to swing the wrong way? This is the story of Adam Walsh, of a family broken and rebuilt, of a system changed by grief, and of the questions that still live in the long unfinished echo of a summer day in 1981. Listen closely, because on days like this, the ordinary is the most dangerous part. The map is a simple one: Hollywood, Florida. July sun so bright it turns windshields into mirrors. A mall that feels like every mall in America, a shared ritual, a place where the air conditioning is a second religion. Families drift through the aisles like shoals of fish, pulled by bargains, by habit, by the quiet choreography of weekends. Inside, Adam is a little comet, bright and impossible not to notice if you're looking. He is the age where questions spill out. Why does the sky do that? Who fixes the sun? Can I try? And still, he knows to stay close. This is the deal kids make with their parents. You show me the world, and I will hold your hand while we do. Reve makes a calculation, a reasonable one, a normal one that in other versions of the world ends with a smile and a "did you have fun?" and ice cream on the way home. She leaves Adam at the Atari display, surrounded by older boys who tap the joystick with that solemn intensity boys treat important things. She goes a few aisles away. She takes her breath, the breath that becomes a cavern. Time, at first, is a confused checkerboard. The boys are told to leave the display. A security guard tries to keep order. The exit closest to them is not the one Adam came in. Imagine this from a child's height. Suddenly the world is crowds and legs and no mother. The fluorescent buzz too loud. The space too big. The door that opens is just a rectangle of white light. Was there a hand that took his? Was there a voice that sounded kind? Or was it panic that chose the wrong corridor? As fear becomes a compass that points only to a way. By the time Reve returns, grief is a shape with no edges. She asks an employee. She asks another. The air grows heavier, pressed down by a mother's widening circle. She calls his name. Adam. It echoes off the smooth ceiling, off the shelves, off the summer afternoon that has decided to turn. What if someone had said, "We lock the doors now just to be safe"? What if someone had said, "Check every exit"? Questions like these are the ghosts that move in the corners of every account of this day, a chorus of what-ifs that haunt even the most practical mind. But what investigators would learn next would change everything. Human beings are not built for sudden nothing. We are built for explanation. So when the store becomes an echo chamber of a mother's voice, people begin to act. Employees spread out. A police call goes out, and in 1981, the system for missing children is less a system, more a stack of assumptions bound with hope. The parking lot is a white-hot field where heat shivers. Car doors open and close. A mother's eyes are instruments now, collecting details. A striped shirt, small sneakers, a bowl haircut. A father, John, arrives, the kind of father who becomes a force field. He circles the perimeter in widening arcs, stopping strangers with the urgency of the desperate. Have you seen my son? He's 6. Each time he says the number, it falls like a weight inside the conversation, turning strangers into witnesses. Night comes. Sirens float, distant and then near. Bowls of light play across concrete and grass. Volunteers gather. Flyers are imagined, then built. Face, name, phone number, a handful of paper against an ocean of not knowing. In the space between official steps are the unofficial ones. Prayers whispered in cars, neighbors calling neighbors, a father promising the air itself. I will find you. The neighborhood becomes a nervous system. People peer into hedges. A man checks under his boat. A woman stands up in bed at 2 in the morning and stares into her driveway, because some sting in the air, says, look. If you're a parent, you already know. This is the part where the world drops its mask and shows the blunt steel behind it. Safety becomes a word with edges. Trust becomes conditional. And still, the clock keeps moving. Hours turn to days. Hope, while infinite in theory, has to live inside a human chest. Thins, thickens again, changes shape. But what officers would discover weeks later would take the story from hope to horror. 2 weeks is an eternity when each minute is a question. In August, the air in Florida is humid enough to feel like a second skin. The community's search takes on the sad rhythm of grief. Meet, look, return, repeat. Then, miles away, up along a canal in the Vero Beach area, a fisherman notices something he never wanted to see. He hesitates. He looks again. He calls it in, and the call rings through dispatch like a cold bell in a church whose doors are already open. The details that follow are the kind we tell quickly and gently out of respect. Investigators recover remains. A medical examiner works with the silent facts of anatomy. The identification comes through with the cruel clarity of science. It is Adam. News spreads not like sound, but like pressure. Houses go quiet. The mall becomes a mournful landmark. A family's life divides into before and after, the seam still raw. And all of South Florida learns how an absence can make a whole map feel unsafe. There's a tendency in stories like this to turn everything into a single point of darkness. But this is a family, a neighborhood, a city, human beings with their own complicated goodness, stepping forward with casseroles and candles and clumsy words that try to taste like comfort. And there are police who will not sleep right, not for years, because some cases burrow into the soft parts of their lives and live there. Grief, though, does not end a story. It changes its genre. What investigators heard next, from a name already floating in the dark waters of America, would twist the case again. In the early 1980s, another name haunted police in several states. A drifter whose life was a patchwork of bus stations and flop houses, roadside diners and nights that didn't end. He was already linked by confession and rumor to other crimes. Some real, some imagined, some impossible because the miles didn't match. Otis Toole. He was a man who could lie like other people breathe, and also, maybe, tell truths that no one wanted to hear. He talked about fires he started just to watch the light. He talked about killing as if it were a chore that sometimes got out of hand. And when the name Adam Walsh came up, he said words that would pin a generation to a date on the calendar. He confessed. He said he took the boy. He said there was a car and a highway that turned into a nightmare. He said too many things and not enough. The specifics slid in and out of his mouth like fish. He recanted. He confessed again. He told stories that overlapped and contradicted. And police waded into that swamp because what else can you do when the only map you have is drawn in pencil by a hand that shakes? Investigators followed the threads they could find. Cars that might have been set on fire, a machete that might have existed, a fabric carpet remembered in scraps. In some tellings, the drifter sounds like a storyteller who found his audience and learned to hold them. In others, he is a haunted man whose mind tripped on its own shadows, revealing terrible things and hiding them in the same breath. If you were a detective, which part would you believe? The parts that matched the rough frame of the crime? the parts that felt too detailed to be made up, or the doubt itself, which stands up in any room and asks, "But where is the proof?" And in the quiet house where Adam's parents sat with their grief, the news of a confession landed like a stone in a river. Ripples, then eddies, then new questions. Because what officers tried to verify next would leave the case in a fog. In crime stories, truth is often a scaffold built out of a dozen different strengths. Physical evidence, witness accounts, timelines, confessions, the lab's unblinking measurements. Here, so many of those beams were warped or missing, leads that looked promising blistered in the sun. An old car, the one the drifter said he drove, was reportedly destroyed, taking with it whatever clues might have lived in the carpet or the trunk. Tools that might have been weapons remained half-ghosts in a story treated, at different times, as both fact and fiction. And the geography, where, when, which exit, how long, kept shifting under questioning like sand under a tide. For investigators, this is the nightmare. A confession that is hard to hold. A suspect who both knows things he shouldn't and says things that can't be right. The human brain hates this kind of puzzle. It's not just hard, it's insulting. Meanwhile, the case became a public wound. TV anchors' voices lowered. Newspapers learned a new language of caution. Parents turned into sentries, and malls learned the choreography of scanning without seeming to. Hollywood, Florida, became an emblem of a national fear that had been there all along. The fear of losing a child in the space between one aisle and the next. If you're still here, subscribe, because stories like this deserve more eyes and more voices. Because when police reviewed competing tips, other names would flicker at the edges of the frame, and what they did with those shadows would shape the next decades of debate. One of the cruelest facts about high-profile tragedies is the gravity they exert on other stories. In the months and years that followed, rumors collected like leaves in a storm drain. People who wanted attention found microphones. People who had seen something long ago approached detectives with memories like faint pencil lines. And in the folklore of America's underbelly, notorious drifters and killers began to appear as shapes in the fog around Adam's case. Some viewers will know the names, and they will wonder. There were whispered links, rejected by investigators, to men whose crimes elsewhere had taught America new definitions of horror. Sightings with poor resolution, timelines that almost worked and then didn't. The public imagination is a heat source. It warms speculation until it glows. Law enforcement tried to do the work that looks boring in the papers. Matching dates, checking shifts, measuring miles. They walked the math. They asked, where was this man that day? Where was that vehicle? Who can confirm it? And not just in a story told years later to make a person interesting. The conclusion, for many of those shadows, was the quiet answer professional investigators give when the lines don't meet. No evidence. For others, the door remained only cracked, not open. And the original drifter's confession still sat on the table, like cards that might belong to the deck but keep changing suits. It is hard, so hard, to tell a family, we cannot deliver certainty. Harder still when strangers insist online that they know what happened, and their certainty comes cheap. But something else was taking shape at the center of the family's life. Not just a search for the person who did this, but a war against the very conditions that let children vanish into the ordinary. Because what the Walsh family did next would change how America responds when a child goes missing. Grief can turn people into ash, or it can turn them into instruments. John and Reve Walsh chose the second. They took the unbearable, and they used it like a crowbar against a system that needed to move. In the years after Adam's death, the Walshes became architects of laws, of protocols, of habits of mind. Big changes often hide inside small names. One of those names is Code Adam, a store-wide alert program that activates when a child is reported missing on the premises. The procedure is simple and powerful. Lock the exits, flood the eyes of every employee with the child's description, turn a sprawling store into a watchful hive. Today, in thousands of stores, those words still crackle over intercoms when a child is suddenly not where they should be. Even saying the name is an act of remembrance. They advocated for a national center dedicated to missing and exploited children, because in 1981, The United States treated missing kids like isolated local emergencies instead of a coherent national challenge. The Walshes worked with law enforcement, lawmakers, and media to build a network where there had been islands. Over time, information began to move faster, smarter, kinder. John became a public figure through television, channeling fear and outrage into something that helped catch fugitives and raised awareness for countless families living inside the longest night. He turned a camera into a searchlight. He spoke to America in the language America hears after dinner. And from that screen, he reached people who didn't think they knew what to look for until they did. If you've ever seen a missing child's photo travel farther than it could have in 1981, if you've ever watched a store lock its doors for a code atom, if you've ever heard an Amber Alert interrupt the everyday, you've witnessed grief that refused to die become policy that saves lives. It did not bring Adam back. Nothing mortal could, but it bent the world a little away from indifference. And still, a case file remained, its pages dog-eared, its notes in several hands. Investigators turned it over and over, like a worry stone. What the police would decide decades later would reopen old debates and, for a family, close a particular door. Decades had passed. The world had changed in ways that would have seemed like science fiction the summer Adam disappeared. But the file stayed. Detectives aged. New eyes looked at old pages. Technology improved. Old evidence was re-examined. The drifter who had once confessed had died in prison. One more ghost in a story already crowded with them. Finally, years later, the Hollywood Police Department did what police departments sometimes must do when the weight of a case, and the pattern of its facts, points in one direction even as the evidence refuses to stand up in a courtroom. They announced that the case was, at last, closed. They named the drifter Otis Toole as the person responsible. The reaction was a complicated braid. For the Walsh family, it was something like an ending, a formal acknowledgement of what they had believed for years. For others, it was an unsatisfying certainty. How can a confession that stumbled and stuttered become the last word? Investigators explained what they could, careful with the specifics, respectful of the wholes. The public listened with the strange etiquette grief teaches. Nodding, arguing, wondering aloud whether closure without trial is closure at all. Here's a hard truth that real detectives learn and most TV shows don't dramatize. Some endings are administrative, not cinematic. They are a decision to stop searching, not because anyone stopped caring, but because, given what is known and what can be known, the search has to move to a different place. Memory, policy, prevention. The press conference ended. Cameras were lowered. Reporters filed their stories. And Adam's parents, who had been turned into advocates by a violent subtraction, went home with an answer that was both less and more than they had once prayed for. But in the corners of the internet, in late-night conversations, in comment sections and living rooms, another question kept whispering. What if the story has more than one shadow? Because the theories that still drift through this case say as much about us as they do about the facts. Human beings are meaning-making animals. When a case grips a nation, we get to work building branching stories. If not him, then him. If not that day, then the day before. If not this road, then the one that runs parallel but a mile farther west. Some of those stories are responsible skepticism, the essential questioning that keeps power honest and evidence honest. Some are wishful thinking in disguise. Some are grief trying on versions of the past to see if any of them hurt less. Over the years, people have floated alternative suspects, questioned timelines, and offered remembered sightings that seemed to glow until reliability dimmed them again. Law enforcement's job was to check, cross-check, and, most unsatisfying of all, to say no when the arithmetic wouldn't resolve. They did, repeatedly. In official statements and private conversations, they tried to put respectful walls around rumors that couldn't stand without scaffolding built from fear. There's an ache in this, but also a responsibility. To tell the story straight, even when straight means we cannot fill the spaces with anything that would make us feel better. Adam's case, officially closed and publicly debated, lives in that unsettled room where truth and proof have a complicated relationship. What, then, can we hold on to with both hands? We can hold on to the human forces the event released. The way neighbors turned into search parties. The way strangers learned to look out for other people's children. the way a family refused to bury their son's name beneath the cruelty that took him. We can hold onto reforms and alerts and laws whose dry acronyms hide the warmth of lives altered for the better. We can honor, with quiet language and patient attention, the boy whose story asked a country to grow up. And we can admit this: there are cases that, even when closed, remain open inside us. What investigators concluded years after the summer of 1981 changed the official ending. But what the rest of us carry is our own unfinished sentence. A child's room becomes a museum. A kitchen calendar stops on a date it won't leave. Letters arrive, some kind, some cruel in their unintentional way. I know how you feel. From someone who cannot. The family learns to speak to cameras without breaking, to cry in hallways instead of live shots, to turn their child's name into a banner that means something universal and not only personal, which is, in some ways, the most generous thing a parent can do. Communities practice a new vigilance. Parents invent rituals. We meet here. We say the color of our shoes, so I know it's you. We do not go with anyone who says I sent them. Malls and big box stores knit safety into their architecture of aisles. Doors that can be locked at a word. Intercoms that can become alarms. Staff who know that the first minutes are everything. Police departments adapt, too. The wall between local problem and national pattern thins. Information rides wires faster. Photos that once traveled by mail now move in seconds, not days. When a child disappears now, whole systems wake up. If you've ever seen this happen and felt a chill, good. That shiver is the body learning the lesson grief taught and refusing to forget it. There's a sentence John Walsh once said in many different ways across many interviews, that no parent should have to feel as alone as he and Reve felt in those first terrible hours. That sentence became a vow. And even if you disagree with parts of the official ending, you can keep that vow with him and with them. Because what we choose to build from tragedy is sometimes the only part of the story we can control. Stand very still, and you can hear a mall on a summer afternoon. The murmur of people moving, the chime of a register, the buzz of cheap lights, the bright electronic chirp of a game console teaching a child how to win. Now imagine, as a discipline, that a different sound lives here too. The sound of a door closing in time, a mother turning back down an aisle a beat earlier, a guard saying, "This way," and pointing to the right door, not the wrong one. In that version of the story, Adam grows up. He learns to drive. He takes his parents to dinner. He turns 30, 40. He forgets to call and then remembers. He embarrasses his mother with a big gift on Mother's Day, and his father tries to act tough about it and fails. In that version, the word Code Adam never exists because it doesn't have to. We don't get that version. We get this one. And because this is the version we have, we owe it the kind of telling that doesn't sell anything cheap, no gore, no exploitation, no easy villains, no heroes who save the day with one perfect hunch. We get a loving, maddeningly human story. A family, an absence, a country waking up to the fragile miracle of a child in a toy aisle. So we say the name right. We say the date carefully. We let the silence after both of them do its work. And we remember that the work is never finished. But what you choose to do with this story today, now, after the video ends, could change the next one. If you've stayed with me to this point, you already know this isn't only a story about a crime. It's a story about a little boy named Adam, about a mother who turned a store into a city with her voice, about a father who chose not to let grief make him small, about police who learned through failure and kept showing up, about neighbors who swapped comfort for action. It's about you, too, because vigilance is a communal act, and memory is a kind of safety we create together. Here's the thing I keep circling back to. Somewhere, right now, a child is staring at a screen in a store, mesmerized. Somewhere, a parent does the mental math and thinks, "I'll be right back." Somewhere, a manager hears the words Code Adam and turns the dial from ordinary to alert, and the doors become shields instead of exits. That's the echo of Adam Walsh. That's the part of the story we made better. If you're still here, subscribe, because stories like this deserve more eyes and more voices. And one more thing, what do you think happened? Leave your theory in the comments. Someone out there knows the truth. Remember the name. Say it kindly. Carry it carefully. And when a child's laughter cuts across a summer afternoon, let it stop you for just a second. long enough to be grateful for the world as it is, and stubborn enough to change the parts that still need changing.